I am so happy to welcome Dana DiTomaso. She is the founder and lead instructor of Point Playbook. She's got a great presentation for us for SEO trends for 2025, a super hot topic. Dana, it is so nice to have you joining us. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here.
Fantastic. I'm going to turn it over to you, and then I'll see you in just a little bit for some Q&A.
All right, sounds good. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. I know it's been a couple of long days of information, so analytics is obviously not necessarily the thing you want to listen to when you're at the end of your energy from watching a couple of presentations, but hopefully you'll hang on in for this one, because obviously 2025 SEO has changed a lot. I've been working in this field since 2000. I actually started as a website developer. Turns out I'm way better at SEO than I was at making websites. And certainly SEO has never changed quite as much as it has recently with all the advent of AI overviews and everything else. And I am talking about AI, everyone's favorite topic, in my talk today. But I also want to talk a little bit about, obviously, GA4 and analytics and how that can work with SEO to make your SEO strategy stronger. So let's talk about data. We've never had more of it. We have GA4. We have all sorts of other data we can evaluate on our website. We have our CRM. We have all this AI information being tossed at us. We have tons and tons of data. We can record different customer interactions, who bought what, how much people spent, tons of data. But unfortunately, data has never been less accurate. And why is that? I go through some of those reasons in this post here, and don't panic and try to Google this. I have a link at the end of the presentation today that is going to walk you through all the different posts I'm going to reference in my talk today. So don't feel like you have to type this in right now. There's going to be a QR code at the end. Just get ready for that. Okay. So in this talk here, I ask, market analytics data is wrong. Can it be fixed? Spoiler alert, no. Why can't it be fixed? Because people use ad blockers. And yes, there are changes to Chrome. They're making ad blockers a little bit less useful as they used to be, but they're still ad blockers. People might have consent management. So if someone says, no, I don't want to be tracked, you can't actually track them. Surprise. And there's all sorts of other reasons why you can't track people, like privacy-focused browsers such as, say, Safari or Brave or any of those kinds of browsers. All of those reasons mean that our analytics is really not accurate. There might have been one shining moment back in, say, like 2004, 2005, where we might have been able to measure everything, but we are so far past that now. And I think that was part of the problem with navigating from UA to GA4, was suddenly people were saying, well, this data doesn't match up between Universal Analytics and GA4. It says I have different numbers of users or different numbers of page views. Why is that? Well, the thing is, they were both right. They just measure stuff in a different way. And I think it really exposed for people that really what you get out of a system is what the system decides to measure and not measure, and also the limitations placed on that system by outside forces like ad blockers and consent management tools. So your data is not accurate. And I really want you to accept into your heart that analytics will never be perfect. Just let it go. There are so many other things you can do with your time other than trying to set up analytics that's going to be perfect, because you're just going to be sad. It's never going to be perfect. So let it go, sing that song to yourself, and let's move on. Instead, I want you to work with what we have and let go of what you cannot get. So people who let you track them, track the heck out of those people. Track everything you can about them, but let go of the stuff that you cannot track. If someone says no to being tracked, don't be sad. Just let it go. Instead, we're going to track the people who let us track them. And this isn't just true of GA4. This is true of any, say, conversion information. So if you have Google Ads conversions on your website, someone says no to being tracked, you can't track them in ads either. And it also extends to third-party tools like SEO's favorite, Google Search Console, which is also not accurate. One of the most common questions that I get as an analytics professional is, I see this number of clicks in Google Search Console. I see this number of sessions from GA4 and GA4. Why is that? And well, the reason why is because Google Search Console isn't telling you everything, and GA4 isn't telling you everything. So then you get a combination of two systems not telling you everything, and you get not a lot of everything. And why is Google Search Console not accurate? Well, unfortunately, it is directionally useful, but they don't give you all the data. And part of it is Google for privacy reasons, and I might say privacy in quotes here, privacy reasons, because they used to give us this data. Back in 2009, they took it away. And if you've been in SEO long enough, you might remember what it was called not provided. And it started to sneak in. And at the beginning, they said, oh, it's only going to affect 5% of queries. And then we lost all of our organic search data. And if you're new to the field, you're like, wow, we used to get that once upon a time. We sure did. And we don't anymore. So since then, a lot of SEO has been trying to replicate that. And again, I would say, let it go. Know that Google Search Console data is not going to be 100% accurate in terms of the volume or number of impressions or clicks. You might be missing some lower volume searches, but directionally, it is more or less useful. So I would say, again, don't focus on the numbers, look at the trends. So now we have all this inaccurate data that I've really sold you on, right? And you're thinking, well, what the heck am I supposed to do with all of this inaccurate data? So the first question I want to walk you through today is, are you matching search intent? And this is a tricky question, I think, because the problem is that people, they'll look at search intent and they'll think, well, I guess I got a lot of traffic here. I don't want to, look too far behind the curtain and decide if the search intent isn't very good or not, because look at all this traffic I'm getting. And if I better match search intent, I might get less visitors to the website and it's going to look bad in my reports. But certainly, I would rather have 500 visitors who are way more likely to convert than 1,000 or 2,000 or several, 10,000 visitors who aren't going to convert at all. So matching search intent is really critical. So what I'm going to walk you through now are some ideas on what you can do with GA4 and AI in order to better match search intent, as well as some of the other examples that I'm going to go through today. So first off, I want you to keep this in mind. Not every landing page has the same job. Not every page on your website has the same job. And if you've ever worked in software development, you might be familiar with the concept of jobs to be done. That is, that a page has a specific job. The contact page has a job of people to contact you. The privacy policy page has a job of making sure that you're fulfilling your legal requirements. If people landed on your privacy policy page, somehow, would you expect them to convert? No. Then why, if you're including a list of landing pages with conversion rates, are you including those kinds of pages where people are probably never going to convert from those landing pages? There are some pages that maybe people who already have bought your service are looking at. And so are you expecting them to convert from those pages? No, of course not. So not every landing page has the same job. So the next question I want you to ask of yourself is, do the queries that land visitors on that page match the job of that specific page? Because remember, not every page is the same job. Some pages have a job of, say, people reading your content consumption, which I'm going to come back to in a moment. Some pages have a job of conversion, or in GA4 terms, key eventing, which is, let's accept, that's never going to be a term that takes off. We're just going to keep calling it conversions. So in that case, are those queries top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom of funnel, or just generally, do they match the job of that specific page? And if they don't, do we need a new page, or do we just need to fix the page that already exists? AI, this is where AI really, really shines, because it can easily identify new opportunities for you. And you can see here, this is my AI of choice that I've been using lately. This is called Claude. I really like Claude quite a lot. And what I can do for Claude, and this is, a very low volume. I'm not doing anything at scale just yet. I'm going to talk more about doing this at scale at the end. But what I've done is I have a text file of a page on our website, and then I have gone into Google Search Console and I've said, for this page, give me all the queries that led people to this page for the last 16 months, because that's the maximum amount of data you can pull natively out of the Google Search Console interface. And I've said, based on this, take a look at what I'm talking about in this post, and then take a look at these queries. Which queries are showing up for this page, which means that you might have an opportunity to rank for those phrases, because if your page, which isn't totally relevant for that term, is coming up, that means that Google's really trying to reach its straws and figuring out something that should rank for this. So those are probably good content opportunities, because they may not be served well by existing content that's out there in the world. So looking at this, and I can say, I've attached the content of the post. Here are the queries. Can you identify any queries that aren't well served by this page? And if so, what new content should I create to satisfy these queries? And so Claude comes back with the gap analysis, and I have included a screenshot of the beginning of it. And it identified some actually really fantastic pieces that we should write about on our site as a result of this content gap analysis. My next question that I included here was, now I want you to add up all the impressions and then tell me which ones have the most possibilities. So that was another place to go with that. You can also then take it to somewhere like an AI outline. I would recommend, if you want to learn more about this part of the content process, Andy Crestodina of Orbit Media also has spoken at lots of CMI events. He has a fantastic workflow on his website to go through this kind of process once you've identified these content gaps, and I'm going to link to that at the link that I have at the end of this presentation as well. So I recommend walking through this process with some really key posts. Then the next question you ask yourself is, what is the user journey from that landing page? If that landing page is looking good, but it may not be the place where people convert per se, where else can they go from there? Now, explorations in GA4 can be kind of scary. It's a section not a lot of people use, but I would really encourage you to use the path exploration in GA4. It's one of my favorite explorations, and I have favorite explorations because I'm a big nerd. But the path exploration can tell you what users do after they land on a specific page. This is just what happens when you open a path exploration. This is the default, and you can see the starting point is the event name, which is session start. So that means where their session started, hence the name. And then my second step is looking at the path. So what is the path of that page? And then step 2 is where do they go next? And you can just keep clicking on those until you get all the way down to where they ended up going, which is hopefully what you wanted them to do, which was buy your stuff or get in touch or whatever your overarching content goal is. Then you can take a look at path analysis from an ending point as well. So this is a screenshot from one of our clients. And what I've done in the path analysis, up at the top right corner, you see a little button that says start over. Click on that guy. And then you can put in what your ending point is going to be. In this case, my ending point is form submission. These people got in touch. And then I can see what were the pages before the form submission. One of them is the book an appointment page. Well, that page has one job. It has a form on it and not much else. So good. I'm glad that people are actually filling out the form on that page. That's excellent. But then you can see as well, where do they come from there? And of course, this is for a pest control company. So there's things like cockroach infestations, etc. Don't worry about that part. But the idea is that you can click back and say, what were the pages that led people to this goal? And then if you look at the gap between the landing page and those high value pages, those ending pages, you can start to find opportunities. People started on this page, they clicked here, but they didn't continue on. I find that people who do go here and then go here, they do actually end up filling out the form. So how do you get people from point A to point B? And so this is where the start of the path analysis and the end of the path analysis, which unfortunately you can't actually do at the same time, can really help you identify those content gaps. All right, next question I want you to ask yourself. Do you know how users are using your website? And I don't just mean page views. I mean looking at other metrics that tell you if users are having a good time or a bad time with your website. And you may have used bounce rate universal analytics. It was not a good metric. I could have a whole other talk about why bounce rate in universal analytics was not a good metric. And I'll tell you quickly why. The reason why is that bounce rate was measuring people who looked at a page and then didn't have a measurable action. So if you weren't recording any special events in your website, like if you had an embedded form and when people submitted it, they didn't go to another page, they just stayed on the same page, and you weren't recording that form submission in a specific way, people will look like they bounced even though they got in touch with you. This was a really common problem that I saw in tons of universal analytics implementations. So GA4, it's much better. We have a new metric that I would encourage you to use, which is called engagement rate. It's a really useful metric. And there is a bounce rate in GA4. It is just the inverse of the engagement rate. So don't worry about bounce rate anymore. Just use engagement rate. Bounce rate in GA4 does not equal what bounce rate meant in Universal Analytics. Google should not have used the same name for these two completely different metrics, but they did. So we're just going to use engagement rate, right? Now, what does engagement rate mean? A session becomes engaged when a user has one of these three things happen. So first, your website is their active tab for at least 10 seconds. And then it might not seem like a lot of time, but 10 seconds is a lifetime on the internet. If you want, you can also up this in the settings up to as many as 60 seconds, which is like 3 lifetimes on the internet. Or the other option is they could visit a second page. So they went to your homepage, they went to another page. That counts as an engaged session. And the third option would be if they had a key event. So this is why it's really important to make sure your key events record actual important things that ideally make you money or whatever your goals are for your website, not just things like they clicked on a button. I really want to know, did they do the thing that we want them to do? Did they do the thing that made us money? So if any of those things happen, that session becomes engaged. And really looking at engagement rates can really help you tell if people are engaging with your content the way you want them to, but also it outlines the quality of your traffic. Is this traffic any good? Because one of the things that I've seen quite a lot of is you can also identify really bad traffic by looking at sources with bad engagement rates. Oh, sorry, I hit ahead too soon. So one of the stories I want to tell, because I have a little bit of time here to tell this story, is we were working with a client who was spending a whole lot of money on a third-party ads network that I will not name, but you've probably heard of it. And what we were seeing was that they just weren't getting any leads at all from this ad network, just nothing, tons of traffic, no leads. So we just took a look at their engagement rate. And I created a report in Looker Studio that broke out the different ad campaign sources, the ads network they're paying for, as well as their own Google ads, LinkedIn ads, etc., and just looked at engagement rate for each. And we found that the engagement rate for this ads network was basically 0. And then we took a look at the information more deeply, and we could see that on this site, we were recording 25% scroll depth. They had no scroll events. And then when we looked at the traffic even further, we could see that basically all this traffic that this ads network was delivering them were bots. They weren't even human beings. There was like maybe one human that accidentally ended up in there, but I'm talking about thousands of visits here, all bots. And so really, this is where engagement rate told us that there's something suspicious with this traffic, and we really need to dig into it. So if you take a look in your GA4 data, look at it by a campaign level or a traffic source level or a landing page level, that can tell you the quality of that traffic. Are people who are landing on this page actually engaging with this page in a meaningful way? And engagement rate and views don't even tell the entire story either. Engagement rate is a nice, is this thing on kind of metric. Views, formerly called page views, might be something that you're using, but you can go so much further beyond that. And I have a post on my website, again, link will be at the end, on how to evaluate content success beyond basic page views. And one of the things that we often measure on websites to see how people are doing is something called content consumption. Content consumption tells us if that content was engaging. And what it does, it's a Google Tag Manager recipe. It's also a WordPress plugin. It takes a look at the piece of content we're looking at, and it measures how long it would take to read that piece of content based on the number of words in that piece of content. If that person stayed long enough on the page to read all the content, we would say that that content, they dwelled long enough to view it. And then if they scrolled to the bottom of that content, then we would say that they scrolled to the bottom of the content. And if both those things are true, then the content was consumed. And then you can end up with a chart like this. This is in Looker Studio, where we're taking a look at these different pages. I couldn't share them with you, unfortunately, because of client confidentiality. But you can see the views, the percentage difference, and then we're seeing the percentage of people who dwelled, so they spent long enough on the page, the percentage of people who scrolled, so they actually got to the bottom of the content, and the percentage of people consumed. And it is horrifyingly low how few people actually consume content. You can see scrolling is a lot more popular than dwelling, which makes us think, are people just like flying on by and getting to the bottom? Are they just bailing entirely? But this also gives us a starting point to improve content, to make sure that people are reading everything that's on the page, or at least finding the content compelling in a way that can help us tell if this is useful to our users or not. Because remember as well, beyond this content consumption, that's one way to measure if people are actually reading the content, but content isn't just the written word. Videos have never been more popular as a content mechanism. And if you're not including video with your written pieces, you really should be. But if you are, remember as well that you should record content consumption based on how people are viewing your videos. So for example, on our site and our client sites, we often will track 90% video completion, or whatever the end of the video is. Sometimes if there's like a specific outro, we know it's a certain number of length, then we'll say it's X number of seconds into the video, whatever works for you. But that way we record that as content consumption as well. So that way we have text content consumption, we have video content consumption, and then by comparing the content consumption rates between text and video, we can see for this audience, what is more compelling? Does text speak more to our audience, or does video speak more to our audience? And then you know what to prioritize when it comes to creating more content in the future. I know video seems like a lot more work. It really is not. Really writing can be tough as well. So really keep in mind, maybe video is the way you should go with your content in the future. As someone who creates both text and video for everything I write, personally, I'm not a video person, but lots of other people are, and it really helps to improve the consumption rates for our content as well, our educational content. Okay, next question to ask yourself. What new content opportunities should you pursue? So human brains, surprise, we can't actually remember everything. We're not very good at that. And so in this case, I want you to take your AI tool of choice. I showed you Claude earlier. We also use ChatGPT. There's lots of different tools out there. Feed that AI your content and your other assets. You can set up a custom GPT, for example, in ChatGPT, feed it everything that you have, and then it can start to remember the stuff for you. And then you can feed that AI tool, whichever one you've created, your performance data from GA4, from Google Search Console, from your CRM, etc. And then because it's got your entire website and all your content assets in its brain, it can start to draw connections between the performance data that you're seeing and the content that's on the page, and can really help you make better content decisions. Because then you can ask questions of this content brain. You can say, here's our performance data from GA4, here's what we're saying in GSC, you know which content this is, what content do we already have that fulfills these search queries? Or which content is doing well on search versus social, for example. So that's another question that I really like asking, and I fully stole this from Andy Crestodina of Orbit Media, as I mentioned earlier. I'll have a link to his post at the end too. Asking, which content did better on search versus social? They're different platforms. Different content will do differently on those platforms. So it's an important question to ask the differentiation between search and social to figure out which content's going to do better where, and then you know where to market that content appropriately as well. And then also, based on this research, what content are you missing out on? Here's the keywords that we've researched. Here's the audience that we've researched. Feed that into your AI website brain and say, what content should we have based on this information that I've given you? Because again, this brain also has all this information in there and can figure out what you're missing, or what can you repurpose based on content that already exists. You don't have to necessarily create wholesale every single time you come out with new pieces of content. And then another question you can ask yourself is, what content is doing a great job of bringing those high value sales? And this is where your CRM data can really come in. I'm a big advocate of really trying to tie together GA4 data with your CRM data. There's lots of different methods to do that. One common method we do is recording the GA4 client ID, and then we can see how people came in via GA4, and then what ended up being a high ticket sale at the end of the day, which is particularly useful for those of you working in, say, non-e-commerce platforms, because people fill out a form. You kind of know where they got to the form, but do you know the actual value ultimately of that sale? It might take months. It could take years, depending upon what kind of field you're in. And then going back and saying, oh, this ad campaign actually drove X number of dollars of value. That's where tying together that GA4 data and your offline CRM data is really critical. So in this case, you can again feed that information to your AI brain and say, tell us which content is doing the best job of driving those high value sales. It can do that for you. And then based on that information, you can then ask it, now you know what content is bringing in the high value sales. What other content do you predict would be high value for our business based on all the research and existing content that I've given you? And it can start to identify those opportunities and really help you prioritize your work for 2025 so you know where to start, which is, the place that should be making you the most money, right? Like this, we all want raises. We all want to stay stable in our jobs, and making sure that our organizations are making money is a great way to make that happen for yourself. All right, last pieces before we end off here. So what else should you start tracking in GA4 in 2025? Just a couple little tips. Tracking image views. I'm a big fan of tracking image views. I would never have done this in Universal Analytics because it would be so much noise. There wouldn't have been a great way to report on it. But if you go on kpplaybook.com, peek behind the scenes, if you use a plugin like Omnibug to take a look at that, you can see that I record every single image that you view on our website. And this way it gives me an extremely fine-grained control over knowing exactly where people bail. Because you can record scroll depths of 25, 50, 75, etc. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you know where between 25 and 50 that they stopped. And I write really long blog posts, so I want to know exactly where people stop. And by recording exact image views, then I can give a very good sense of where people got bored and stopped reading on our blog posts. And it's a really helpful way to optimize that content. I also recommend using audiences in GA4. Many clients I work with, people that I teach, have never used audiences before. I love using audiences for all sorts of different stuff in GA4. Audiences based on, say, locations or pages that people have engaged with. There's so many different ways you can use audiences. For example, another audience that I often have are people who, for example, people who viewed a careers page. You have an audience of people viewing your entire website, except for people viewing the careers page, because they're probably not going to buy your stuff. They just want a job. There's lots of different ways you can use audiences in GA4. I'll include an article about that as well, and the link at the end. All right. Last thing, please set up insights in GA4. You probably had alerts in Universal Analytics, and then when you moved to GA4, you forgot to set up insights because it's very hard to find. So I have some screenshots here on how to do this. So you're on the home page of GA4. Do not click that little insights button. This is a totally different part of insights. It's actually not even connected to the insights that you would get by clicking on this button. Why are there two insights in GA4? I don't know. Why do they do different things? I don't know. I can't explain it. I just teach it. So what you're going to do is you're going to scroll on down to the very bottom of this page, and then you're going to click on Create Custom Insights. That's where you set up your alerts in GA4 for things like, oh no, we don't have any organic traffic, or no one converted yesterday. Is something wrong? Because the last thing you want to do is to have, like, say, your code removed from the site or something else horrible happen, and then you don't find out until you pull the report for the next month. So please set up those insights for yourself. All right, so here's the link that I mentioned. That's at the end. I'm going to give you a minute to take a picture of this. This will take you to a landing page on my website where I have all the resources that I've mentioned in this talk today. And as well, I teach GA4. So if you're interested in learning about GA4, I have a 20% off code for my courses there. So, and I think that that is everything in my talk today. Thank you very much.